Welcome back, and this is Rajesh Pillai with yet another episode on React. In this episode, we will be building a pretty usable calendar component using React from scratch. For date manipulation, we will be using the excellent moment.js library. Before we get into the coding, let's have a look at how this app will look in its end state. So when you run this application, you will be presented with the calendar component that will show the current date highlighted. So today is March 2018 7. So I can click on any date and I can pass in the props back to the parent component with the required information. I can also kind of navigate from one year to the other using this arrow in here. I can use this arrow button to navigate to and fro from the calendar. I could also change the month by clicking on this month field here, and I could go back to any month and navigate back. I can also change the year by double click on the year and either increasing or decreasing the year. I can cancel the editing of this year by pressing the escape key. So this is what the calendar component will look like. Feel free to modify the style the calendar according to your UI requirement. Let's create a new app for our calendar component using the create React app. This will take a while to install. So we are using the latest version of React and NPM for this. Once the create React app is installed, navigate to the folder and then npm install save moment. We will use the excellent moment.js library for doing all the date calculation. Let it take some time to install. Once moment.js is installed, do an npm start to start up the application and then open your application in a browser on localhost port 3000. Okay, you will be greeted with welcome to React. Open the project that you just created in your favorite editor. In this case, I am opening or I am using Visual Studio Code for my development. Right? So you can just go to File, Open Folder, and select the folder React Calendar and open it in here. Let's begin by cleaning up the code and creating a basic stuff for the calendar component. So I'll remove this entire header thing which is not required. I'll remove the logo from here. So if I save this, at this point in time we can see an empty React app in here. I'll also open up the developer tools just in case some error crops up in here. It will be quick to identify and fix. Okay, now inside this source folder, let's create a components folder. Okay, inside the component folder, let's create a folder for our calendar. Okay, we need a couple of things for the calendar. The first is we'll create a file called as index.js. This is where our component will reside. We'll also create a file called as calendar.css. So all the styles will go into this CSS file. Okay, so inside the index.js, let's import the React. So import React from React. Okay, also we need the moment, so we'll say import moment from moment. Okay, let's create a class. Extend from react.component. Okay, and every class has a render method. So in this we will simply return a hard-coded value kind of thing. Okay, so I'll return a div with a class name of calendar container. We'll create these styles later on. maybe for now I'll say calendar as a title. So I'll save this file, and to use this calendar in our app.js we have to import it here. So I'll say import calendar from /component/calendar. Since our file name is index.js, there is no need to give the index or index.js explicitly here. I can simply give the folder name. Okay, once I import in the calendar, I can go to the render method of my app, okay, and use the calendar component in here. Okay, I'll save this file and open the browser. So at this point you will see a title calendar being rendered from the calendar component. So this is the starting point for our calendar component. I will be using the Font Awesome library for styling some part of the calendar. You can download and install it. You can use Bower or npm package to install it. I already had this downloaded, so I'll simply copy the Font Awesome files and go to the React calendar folders public folder. Here I'll create a CSS folder, and within the CSS folder I will paste the Font Awesome library files. Okay, this contains all the required files here. Okay, so once I add it to my public folder, I can go back to my index.html file in the public folder here. So let's open index.html file. And I'll add a link to the Font Awesome CSS file here. Okay, so link is equal to style sheet href css font awesome css font awesome all min.css. So once I save this and go back to the browser and do a refresh, you will see that in the network tab the Font Awesome file is loaded up correctly. In addition to Font Awesome, we'll also write some custom CSS to style our calendar. So I'll not go through the details of the CSS. I'll put a URL of the GitHub where this project is hosted, but then I'll take a close look at this as we go through the code part. So once I have this calendar.css, okay, I'll kind of just quickly wrap you through it. It has a container class, a header and a calendar class, and some styles for the default calendar, styles for the header, okay, styles for the table data. So we will be using HTML table to render the calendar. You can also use CSS grid or floats as required, and couple of styles for the days and the week slot. Okay, weekday styles, okay, the individual day style, the current day style, the month pop-up style. We'll see all this in action. Okay, the now month, the year style, the label month style, and these are the basic CSS that is required for making our calendar component functional. Okay, let's begin the code now by initializing some constructor properties. Okay, so whenever you have the constructor with the props, we'll call the super and pass on the props. We'll set some default value. So we'll set the width of the calendar to. So if the width is being passed from the parent, we will use that width. Otherwise we will set it to a default width of say 350 pixel maybe. We'll set the style as well. So props.style. In case style is not passed, we will initialize an empty object literal. Okay, so this is the basic thing that is needed. We also initialize our state with some of the common properties that we need. So we need a moment date context to work with. I can actually call it as moment context, which points to the moment function. Okay, I also store another instance for tracking today. Okay, let's see whether this is required or not. We also have a show month pop-up which will be set to false initially. This will be used whenever we click on the month field and the pop-up should come up. Similarly, we also have a show year pop-up. Okay, we may rename some part of this. So these are the basic state that is needed for our calendar. Let's also add a reference to our CSS that we created. So import slash calendar.css. So at this point in time, if I save this and go back to the browser and do a refresh, you will see the calendar.css loaded as well. So let's check whether it's coming in or not. Okay, the calendar.css is still not there. Okay, I'll go back to the code. Okay, just to ensure that everything is right. So we have the import calendar.css. I will save the file and do a refresh. Okay, so the styles are coming up in here kind of. Okay. Now since we already have made a provision to pass in the width and style from the parent component, let's also test this out. Open up app.js and let's create a constant style here. So I'll set position to relative and margin to 50 pixel, say auto. Okay, so I can pass this style from in here as style equal to style. Okay, I can also explicitly pass the width as well. So width is equal to say 302 pixel. Okay, so once I save this information, so all this style and width information will be passed from app.js to the calendar component here. Okay, so I'll do a refresh. So nothing visible will happen in here because we are not using that property still yet. To render our calendar, we need the weekdays. We could hardcode the weekdays like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, or we could also use the moment.js function to get us the weekday. So now I'm creating two variables called weekdays and weekdays short. I'm using the moment.weekdays. This will give me Sunday, Monday, Tuesday in the normal case. And also there's a function called weekdays short, which will actually give you the short form of that month. The benefit of this is later on maybe when we need to localize thing, we can still use moment library and also localize these labels as well. Okay, also we may need the month, so I'll just use months equal to moment.month. Okay, so the beauty of this library is this library can take care of all the date manipulations. For example, adding a date, subtracting a date, moving to a particular month or moving to a particular year and things like that. Okay, this eases up the programming part kind of. So I'll save my file. We need couple of more functions to work with the dates. I'll also move this state just above this variable. Okay, so we need a function to retrieve the year, month, days in month. So I'll copy some functions in here and explain line by line. Okay, so we create a function, an arrow function within the context of this called year. This year function will return the current year from the selected date context, right? In this case, okay, I'll change this moment context to date context here. Okay, so that I don't need to manually rename it in all the places. Okay, so the year function will return the current year from the state. Okay, so using the date context format and passing in a y will give me the year. Similarly, to get the month, you can use the state.data context or date context and format it as mm. Okay, to get the days in the month, we can use the days in the month function from the moment library. Okay, to get the current date, we can use the date context.get and pass in the date. Now all these things are documented on the moment.js website. To get the current day, we can use the state.dateContext.format d. Okay, so these 4 or 5 functions are very handy when we need to build our calendar utility. Let's also fix this. This should be months and not month. And also what we will do is we will move the state to top, just so that it's easy for us to locate this. So once I save this and go back to the browser, you should see the calendar, the page coming up. Nothing is rendered yet, and also there are no errors on the console. Let's have a look at the first day of the month function. Even though I am calling this as first day of the month, I am actually getting a value between 0 and 6. 0 means Sunday, 1 means Monday, and 6 means Saturday. Okay, so this will actually tell me how many blank space to leave when we start rendering the calendar. To get this information, we are taking the date context and then we are calling the moment function, passing in the current date context and getting the start of the month. Now the start of the month will give me the date 1/4/2018 or maybe 1/5/2018. It will give me the entire date. The format function with the parameter d will give me the day of the week. Okay, so this function will come in handy when we start rendering our calendar. Let's start laying out our calendar now. The first thing that we will do is to render the weekdays. Okay, so I'll make some corrections in here. So we'll wrap this within a table with the class name of calendar. Okay, so the entire data will go in here. This will have a t head. Okay, so t head will have a tr with a class name of calendar header. Okay, so currently we are just keeping it like this in here. Okay, and then after the t head we will create our t body tag. Okay, and within this t body we have to render the weekdays. Now I could write my entire code in here to render the weekdays. Okay, but let's create a variable to store the weekdays and then use that variable to print the output within the t body tag. So just below the render function we will create our weekdays element. Okay, so this weekdays, this will actually output Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. So what we are doing here is we are mapping through all the weekdays short. Okay, this we already created in here, weekdays short. This will give me the short form of the weekdays. Okay, and for every day we are creating a table data, okay, with a class name of weekday and also giving it a key so that you won't get that key error. Okay, and then we are actually printing the day between this td tag. Okay, so this is what the weekday function will do. Once I have this variable in here, I can go to this table body and then use that variable here to print the weekday. So once I make this change, save the file and go back to my browser. Okay, and let's load it again. We see we are getting some error in here, right? That's fine, but we'll take care of this error shortly. But you see the weekdays are getting printed here, right? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday. Okay, we will have a look at this error. The error is td cannot appear as a child of t body. Okay, so this is an easy fix. So if I open the code, you'll observe that I actually rendered the entire td within the t body, right? So this is not allowed. So we have to wrap this within a tr. Okay, so within the tr, this entire td of weekdays will be rendered, right? So if you take a close look at this, okay, so you will observe kind of these two connections, right? So this weekdays that you are creating here is coming from here. Okay, this is actually creating a td and this td has to be rendered within a table row. Okay, this is what the error was. Okay, now if I save this file and open up the browser, you will see there are no errors and the browser is kind of correctly rendering my element. So now we have the weekdays being printed. Let's now continue and draw out the rest of the calendar data. Okay, the days kind of, right? So for creating the days, I can come back in here and then create a variable called tr elements. Okay, this will contain the entire row of data. So at this point in time, tr element does not exist, right? We have to create it. Okay, now to create tr elements, we will actually follow a couple of steps as this data has to be derived, right? Because when you create a calendar, right, a calendar like say this, right, so we need to figure out the start of the day for this specific month, right? And then we had to kind of leave some empty spaces from here. So we have to do this empty spaces computation, start the calendar from the respective start of the month, and then keep on continuing until the end of the month. So let's begin by creating this empty row first, right? So for the month of March, you see there are 4 empty rows. Okay, for the month of April, there are no empty rows. For the month of May, there are 2 empty rows, right? So we have to compute this. So the easy way to do this is I'll create a variable called blanks, which is an array. Okay, so I'll loop through I equal to 0, I is less than this dot first day of month. Remember this function, this actually gives us an index of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5, right? So we can use this function to create a blank elements. Okay, so then we will say blanks dot push. Okay, so I will create a TD. Okay, so I'll create TD kind of. Then I'll assign some class name of empty slots. Okay, I'll put some empty string between these TDs. Okay, so we can put the empty string like this. Okay, I'll just align this thing here. So now what we are done here is actually we are looping through all the start of the month and then creating a list of empty array in here. So we have the blanks array. So if we take the current month, say March 2018, there should be 4 empty TDs that will be printed. So we can quickly verify this by putting a console.log, and I'll just give it a label of blanks and blanks. Okay, so kind of we are outputting this blanks array that we are creating onto the console. Okay, I'll save this. At this point you will still see an error called tr elements not found. That's fine because we haven't yet kind of created the tr elements. Okay, to fix this error we will simply create a tr elements and set it to empty array for now. Okay, save it and go back to your browser. Okay, now you see there are 4 empty array that is being rendered. That essentially means we have to skip this Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and start the March month from Thursday. Okay, this is what is achieved by this blanks array. The next thing now is to fill the entire rest of the calendar, right? So we already have a mechanism to print the blank array. Now we have to start printing the calendar from the respective start position, and we have to go it till the end of the month. Okay, let's start the code for this now. So I'll just keep this log here for the moment. I'll create a variable called days in month and set it to an empty array. I'll loop through the day starting from 1 and up to day less than equal to this dot days in month function. Okay, and increment the day. Okay, this will loop through all the date. So we'll create a class name to tag the current day. So we say if the day is equal to this dot current day, we'll implement a method if it is not there. Okay, so we will assign a class of day and current day. Otherwise we will simply assign a class of day. Okay, then we will push this into the array. Okay, so we'll push a td into the array. Okay, we'll also create a key so that there is no key error. Okay, I'll give it a class name of class name, the variable that we created. Close the td tag. Okay, and within the td tag I'll create a spans. Okay, and within the span I will render the day. Okay, I will render the day. So at this point in time we have a days in month array. So let's log this and see the output. Days in month. Okay, I'll save the file and go back to the console. Now see, you see entire 31 days is getting logged into the console, right? So this essentially means if you are printing the calendar for the month of March, okay, so if we are starting with 4 blank rows followed by 31 days. Okay, this is what we have achieved with this piece of code. Now we have to combine this blank array plus the days array and start creating the calendar rows. Now one thing to note is that as we are printing the row, only 7 days should be printed per row, right? That essentially means we have to check for a condition where this specific row is divisible by 7 or not. If it is divisible by 7, we will start inserting a new row. Okay, a small arithmetic thing we have to do in here. Okay, so let's start by the merge. So we'll create a total slot. So what is a total slot? Total slot is nothing but entire thing from the blanks array and plus the entire thing from the days in month array. Okay, this is what my total slot is all about. Okay, let's create let's create a rows array and let's also create a cells array. Okay, so once I have this, I'll loop through the total slots using the for each. Okay, I'll pass in the row and the index. Okay, so I'm looping through all the data in the total slots. Okay, I'll just correct out the spelling in here. Inside the for loop, now we will write the if condition. So we'll say if the index is divisible by 7, okay, divisible by 7, okay, so we will push the row. Okay, so what we are doing here is we are checking for the index. Initial index will be 0, then 1, then 2, right? We're checking if it's not divisible by 7, right? If it's not, this is still in the current row. So we are pushing that row information, the data from this row one at a time into the cells. Okay. Else, if it is divisible by 7, then we have to create a new row. So we'll say let insert row equal to cells dot slice. Okay, so what this cells dot slice will do is it will create a kind of new array of rows, okay, and store that into the insert row. Okay, check out the slice method in the MDN. Then we will push this into the rows array, okay, and reset the cell to empty array, okay, and then push the row back, okay, so that a new row is created. Okay, so this is a simple logic to print the output 7 cells at a time. Okay, so once we are done with this, we will do a check on this. If the index is equal to the total slots dot length minus 1, okay, so if you are at the end of the array, okay, let again do a slice. This is for printing the last array, and push the row into the rows array. Okay, now we are done with the total slots logic kind of thing, right? Now at the end of this we have an array of rows and an array of cells. Okay, now we can create our tr elements in here. So we can loop through all the row, okay, and get the data for the row and the index. I'll return a new tr, okay, with the key of, I'll create a random key here just so that I don't get the error of keys. So we are creating the rows in here, right, and then outputting the value of the data. Okay, now you know from the above thing, right, these rows contain entire collection of rows along with the cells, right? So at this point in time I could save this information, and we already have this tr elements being printed in here, right? So if I go back to the browser, okay, there are some errors that is kind of coming up. Let's fix this error. So the error that says is row.push is not a function. So this is not row.push, it should be rows.push. Okay, I'll save this and go back to the browser. Okay, now you see we have a simple calendar being rendered, right? Ignore this each child in an array or iterator should have a unique key property, because we might have rendered missed some key in a loop somewhere, right? So we'll troubleshoot this later on. So right, so at this point in time we have the basic calendar kind of ready. Now this is actually printing the calendar for the current month. So if I open up the current month, you see the day starts from Thursday and it goes up to Saturday, the 31, right? So after this we will start printing the month and the year navigation here, so that we can change the month or we can change the year, and we have a simple functionality being baked into this calendar. Before we start building the month and the year navigation, let's fix the key error. So in this scene here, right, we have this array getting created with td, right? So in here we need a key, so I'll give key is equal to index into some random thing, just so that I have a unique value. So if I save this and go back to the application and do a refresh, okay, we see there are no key errors that is kind of coming up. Before winding of this episode, let's do one more change. So if you observe, we are actually passing in the style attribute from the calendar. So let's make use of this. So in the index.js, in the constructor, set this.style.width equal to this.width. Okay, so once we set this information in the constructor in here, we can come back to our render method and attach the style class and assign it a value of this.style. Okay, now if you save this and open up the browser, you will see the style getting changed a bit. Okay, so this is kind of what we will do for this first part of this building a React calendar. So let's quickly recap what we did, right? So we actually created a calendar component which has couple of states in here, the important one being the date context and today, right? So why are we keeping this to information? We are keeping this to information for reasons like, for example, today will always point to the current date, and the date context will be used when we start navigating between months and years. So we don't want this month and year navigation to change the current date, right? That's why we actually track it differently. So once we have this information, we get the weekdays, the short days. We create some helper method for year, month, days in month, current date, first day of the month, first, and things like that. Then we go into the render method and we isolate our entire calendar component into smaller units, right? So we develop the shell of this application. We write a helper function to render the weekdays and a helper function to render the actual calendar days. Okay, and these functions are pretty simple, right? The weekdays are nothing but looping through the weekday short array and creating a td. Then we create the blank element so that we can leave some space before the first day of that month is being printed. Then we actually build an array of all the days in the month, and finally we merge these two arrays together, and then we create rows of 7 cells. Okay, and finally this will be combined into a variable called tr elements, which is finally rendered in the tr body. Okay, so I hope this is a good start for the first part of this building a React calendar component episode. See you in the next part.